As I walked through the meadows towards Mount Yufu, it felt like a dream. The hills whispered to me through the breeze, so I accepted their invitation and walked towards the forest into its embrace. But none of it was meant to happen. And it almost didn't. So let me tell you about what really happened that day and what it was that led me to the mountainside. Our story starts with me climbing out of my capsule in Fukuoka. Last night I got back from Nagasaki late and pretty much passed out the moment I hit the bed. But after a good night's sleep, I'm fully recharged and ready to explore again. Today's trip came together because I got incredibly lucky. I managed to get the last ticket for what's probably the hardest sightseeing train to book in the country, the Yufuin no Mori. The train runs between Fukuoka and Beppu, passing through Yufuin, the famous hot spring town it's named after. And with all the hype around it, I was naturally pretty excited for the train, but not so much for the Onsen town itself. Because for one, I am traveling solo this time, and the idea of staying at a fancy onsen hotel alone just sounds a little sad. And second, I've heard that Yufuin is a pretty tourism-centric experience. You know, trendy snacks, cute trinkets, that kind of stuff. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just not something I care too much about. So I was desperately looking for an excuse to justify taking the train. Then I realized, wait, what am I doing? The clue's in the name, and the answer's right there the whole time. And just like that, I had my excuse, and the story continues. I was running a bit late, so I rushed straight to the station and got there just minutes before the train arrived. Yufuin no Mori is a truly unique-looking train that you'd never find anywhere outside Japan. Its design doesn't quite belong to this era, and strangely, depending on how you look at it, it can feel either retro or sci-fi. When I got on board, it was no surprise that the interior was just as beautiful. Wood veneers, green seat covers. It does remind you of a lush green forest a lot more this time. As the train slowly picked up speed, I settled into my seat, ready to enjoy the view outside the window. That's when I realized how different this felt compared to yesterday's ride on the 2 Stars 4047. Both trains are stunning beyond description. Both are poster children for Kyushu travel. But yesterday, half the seats were empty. Today, it's almost impossible to find one that isn't taken. I can't help but wonder how social media just casually decides which train will get more views, thus more visitors. Luckily, in this case, there's no wrong choice. Both are incredible trains. But I do have something to say about these sightseeing services that might change how you perceive them. Speaking from experience, while the sightseeing trains do make the journey feel more intentional, they don't usually offer enough to stand on their own as a full self-contained experience. Now, I'm not saying this to give sightseeing trains a bad name. I'm saying this because I think people sometimes come with the wrong expectations and see them as something they are not. But if there's one thing these trains are perfect for, it's they're great for inspiration. Just like how I booked a seat on the Yufuin no Mori and then started searching for places of interest along the way to justify the ride, you could do the same. Pick a train that catches your eye, and then look for excuses to justify that reservation. You'll discover places you never would have found otherwise. Sitting next to me was a young bloke from Taiwan, and we started talking about our trips in Japan so far. I showed him the pictures I took on my camera, and he really liked them. He said he wished that he could visit those places too, if only his girlfriend would let him. I was like, yeah, you gonna keep the lady happy? He was like,
you're goddamn right.
Then I discovered that his girlfriend was sitting right in front of him, which certainly made things a little bit awkward, but just a little. Now, if you watched the Kagoshima episode, you might remember that I tried my luck on a gachapon machine for Kyushu train miniatures. I said I'd wait for the right moment to open it, and that moment is now. Inside the capsule was a tiny onsen foot bath, and a suspiciously familiar-looking train right next to it. I got the exact train I'm on right now, and that's the one I've always wanted. How cool is that? I guess it does feel good when you gambled and won, but it doesn't feel so good when there's a gamble you cannot afford to lose. At the end of this ride, there's another 2-minute transfer to catch the only bus to the trailhead. If I don't make it, I might as well just take the next train back. Will I make it? Well, you and I both are going to find out after this jump cut. It wasn't too bad. Yufuin Station was rather small and straightforward, even though I did have to put away the camera and sprint at full speed, hence the jump cut. We wound our way up into the hills, leaving the city behind. Before long, we were greeted by the sight of a quiet little town in the distance, cradled in a lush basin and veiled in mist. The bus dropped me off at the trailhead. There were a bunch of cars, but not a whole lot of people. From there, I could already see the mountain in the distance, but the peak was hidden in a patch of cloud. The climb was going to take about 4 to 5 hours, and I'd have to get back down in time for the bus back to the city, so I started walking. As someone who grew up in the city, I yearned for the wilderness, and Kyushu had been my fix. If I had a choice, my life would be here in the meadow among the hills. I'm destined to become a Disney princess.
Not like this.
Or Austrian nun turned home tutor, for those of you old enough to know. What the two had in common, aside from the compulsory singing while outdoors, was that neither had internet access. So I had to set my route in the hiking app ahead of time and cache the offline map to stay on track. When I reached the foot of the mountain, trees started to appear, and before I knew it, I was completely engulfed by the forest. Sunlight only came in filtered through the branches, revealing a surprisingly diverse world of flora hidden beneath. The way uphill started fairly difficult. There was barely a path, only a trail of very big rocks that slightly resembled a way forward. As the mature adult man that I was, my eyes were inevitably drawn to a very nice stick. But it was, regrettably, a bit too large and heavier than ideal, so it wasn't meant to be. But I told myself that I had to be patient. A father-daughter duo started in front of me. They were light-equipped and didn't have to hold a camera, so they quickly disappeared into the woods, leaving me all by myself. Or so I thought. As I was climbing, I noticed something moving in the corner of my eye, and I turned to see a pair of deer grazing quietly in the distance. It was a magical moment, but I was also admittedly a little nervous. This is not Nara after all. They don't know me as the bringer of rice crackers. If they decided to mess up my day, I'm sure they could. So I took a little detour around them just to be safe, and that's how I found the perfect stick. It's just the right length, perfectly balanced, and had an impeccable grip. It's every man's dream.
My precious.
That's about half an hour into the climb, and I felt pretty good.
This is where we started. This is where we are right now.
After a little while, I found myself walking along the edge of a small ravine. What struck me as odd was the sheer number of trees that were all seemingly knocked over by some unknown force of nature, lying scattered in every direction. At first, I figured it must have been that storm from not too long ago, but then again, I don't remember the storm being that bad. And if something this powerful had hit, surely it would have made headlines. However, the moss on the trunks seemed to suggest that this wasn't a recent happening, but if it wasn't the storm, then what was it? I just couldn't put together a working theory. Dumbfounded, I crossed the ravine with questions unanswered, and I certainly didn't expect to be enlightened quite so soon. Just a few minutes later, I came across a sign explaining the exact problem that I had, and as if words weren't enough, it even had a drawing of the perpetrator committing the crime. So apparently the deer have been nibbling away at the undergrowth, and when that's depleted, they started a buffet on the bark and ended up destroying the forest, one tree at a time. They're an absolute menace. Humanity put up these fences as our last line of defense, but you already knew how that went. Still, I was happy to finally get closure on the matter, so I pushed onwards. Almost 2 hours into the climb, the trees gradually gave way to shrubs, and the rocky obstacle course transitioned into a pebble path. After making another turn, I looked up and realized I had finally made it out of the labyrinth of trees and could see the sky again. I paused to appreciate the view I've earned myself, and I don't think I've had a more beautiful day in my life. But we were not done yet. The path ahead zigzagged upward and grew narrower thanks to the shrubs on both sides. I had to constantly squeeze through them just to keep moving forward. It was getting steeper too, meaning that it was more physically demanding every step I took. What kept me going, however, was the breathtaking views that kept on delivering. Every time I stopped to rest, a little more of Yufuin's beauty was revealed. Have you ever seen a small mountain town bathed in the golden rays from above? I have, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. From where I stood, I could almost make out the peaks still partially hidden behind the clouds, which meant I was on the final stretch. But I was also getting tired. I reached into my backpack for an energy bar and nothing. And that's not good, to put it mildly. You see, I visited Nagasaki the day before and got back pretty late, so I ended up oversleeping a little this morning and totally forgot about my Family Mart run as I was rushing straight to the station. Then the 2-minute transfer for the bus also didn't help. So one thing led to another, and now I haven't eaten anything, and I don't have any food with me. I'll save you the trouble and say it myself. That's pretty dumb. By then, I'd been climbing for about 2.5 hours. I stopped and looked to the side. Patches of dark clouds were rolling in, which might suggest rain, and rain definitely wasn't good. It was time to make a choice. It felt terrible that I was just this close to greatness, but as eager as I was to see the views from the top, I had no idea how tough that last stretch would be, and I definitely didn't want to end up on local TV. So even though it felt like a huge bummer, I knew what had to be done. I took one last look at the small town in the distance and started my descent. I retraced my way back through the woods and bid farewell to the forest, to the deer, to the little orange caps, and to the boar I was never properly introduced to. When I returned to the foot of the mountain, I put down my stick and leaned it against a bench, hoping it might offer its company to another climber on another day. Then I crossed the meadows once more and made my way to the bus stop. It was 5:30 and just a few minutes past sunset. The mountains took on a bluish hue, and the mist crept back into the ravine as silence reclaimed the valley. And it was in that silence I waited for my bus at the side of the road, drowning in disbelief that this journey was nearly over. Climbing Mount Yufu has shown me a side of Japan's natural beauty I never imagined, and in many ways, it sums up what traveling through Kyushu feels like. When people think of Japan, they think of the sprawling metropolis and the ancient capitals. They think of the cities. But Kyushu offers something different. Apart from the cities that each have their own unique flavors, it's also a land of vast, diverse natural beauty that remains largely untouched by most visitors to the country. And I think it's the perfect destination for your second or third trip, when you are ready to be left alone just to appreciate the nature it offers. The town had gone dark when I got off at the station, and the last trains were departing from the platform. My journey will have to end here, and I cannot stay. The trip across Kyushu has been an amazing experience, and I want to thank you for coming along for the ride. I know it took me way too long to make these videos because I always wanted to show you exactly how it feels to be there in every moment, and it takes time to get it right. I hope you enjoyed the videos, or at least got some new ideas for your next trip. I'll see you on the next train. Until then, stay safe. Peace.